Excellent, thank you. I don't again know what edition of the podcast this is, but I don't care. It's going to be an exciting one because in our midst today we have a long-standing part of the community and a local politician. Brian, you probably don't need to be introduced by too many people, but for those that don't know you, do you want to say a few things about your backstory, sir?
Okay, well, I'm Brian Mathew. Very nice to be here, Ed, and Can Do Arts, and hopefully we might get a chance to hear a bit more about what you do.
Yeah.
Because I live out at Yutton Kennel, but I'm actually the councillor for Box and Cologne, and which is kind of, it's about 7 minutes it takes me to get up to Cullen. So it's two lovely communities, very different, but close to where I live. Well, in terms of my backstory, I spent a lot of time overseas as an aid worker.
Really?
So I spent,
fair play.
Yeah, best part of 28 years overseas with Water Aid and the British government's aid programme and various others.
What?
But so I'm a water engineer.
Right.
I'm actually a qualified agricultural engineer.
Wow.
Which has given me the chance to do all this lovely work with amazing communities all around the globe.
Wow.
So in Africa, in the Far East, a bit in Central America.
Amazing. We spend the next hour just hearing about that. That's incredible.
Well, I've just been so lucky to be able to do it. And, you know, coming back here, obviously, most of the time when I work overseas, I tend to go for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So it can be, a year, 2 years, whatever, at a stretch.
Yeah.
Occasionally you get little bits of consultancy work. But my passion really is working with communities, and whether that's in East Timor or Tanzania or here, it's all about people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
The technical stuff, yes, I'm an engineer, but I'm also a social development person. And that's what we're doing.
It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, what are your thoughts on the recent announcements on cutting foreign aid? What was your first thoughts when you heard that?
Well, it's horror, isn't it? And it's irresponsible.
Absolutely.
And when you look at what's happening in Yemen, I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people can die there, and are dying.
It's a double hit, isn't it? Because on the one hand, England is supplying arms and also then starving. So it's quite an interesting pincer movement. Not one I don't think they should be proud of.
No, and it's really interesting now with the new administration in the States, with Biden and Harris, and that may, I mean, they've basically called time on Saudi Arabia. But this whole bone saw issue with the son of the king. How horrible is that?
It doesn't get more horrible.
No, it's something out of an absolute horror story, and to think that we, because of money and oil, which is something we're supposed to be moving away from anyway, connect ourselves with that. There's
a big gulf of morality, and it isn't a gulf as in the big Gulf of Mexico or any oil producing gulf. It's a gulf in morality where I totally agree with you.
But it's not only morality. It's actually you can do well by doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
A
positive win-win for everyone, surely.
Totally.
Take out the conflict. The climate breakdown that we're experiencing is all part of that as well, as you say. We're talking about not only despotic rulers of countries that can rule because with impunity because they have natural resources such as oil. It's like, well, here's a little thing for you. We don't need oil anymore. What we've always needed, though, is civility and the common purpose of human beings. And again, I've said this a million times in these podcasts, I don't have a religious affiliation or a political one. But I do have started a community organisation 23 years ago in recognition of, and with lots of help from far more intelligent people than myself, some of who are water specialists, have worked at the Environment Agency, who do the similar thing. They go across South Africa and whatever, and India, looking at water resources and advise governments. So I've been very fortunate to have had lots of experience around big thinkers around the sustainable development.
And of course, locally, we've got well boring.
Absolutely,
Chippenham's own international development charity, which is a lovely.
I've got a few of their events. They did a lovely choir thing. I'm laughing at the choir thing now because I was with a mate and we were waiting for his wife to sing in it, and she didn't have a solo, and she's a particularly good singer. So I wanted to walk out. No, I didn't. And then they did one at the Old Road as well. But really fantastic. And I think sometimes people, particularly in a situation like this economically, they're looking and go, wait a minute, surely it's okay to cut the aid. Aren't we just being generous to these less whatever developed countries? Or it's like, well, there is a bit of a history with some of those countries about the wealth of this nation. So for me, it's not so much a generosity as more of a compensation for past, not just atrocities,
but it's also it's for us for the future. And what more obvious thing is there than COVID at the moment? Because if it's rather like the business with smallpox once upon a time. Unless you eradicate it everywhere, it's a danger to everyone.
Where can you go? So, I don't know what you thought about not closing down the airports or the ports. It's a game of off-ground TIG. Everyone get off-ground and you can't be hurt. Isolate, whatever. How did they not get that? There's a lot of conspiracy theories, I know this, but it is quite unusual. Don't know if you know anything about Stanley Johnson, about his books and what he was writing about back in the day. He's
a bit of an odd fellow. Yeah.
Well, that's very, very diplomatic. So perhaps you could be our Prime Minister, sir. What a lovely way to describe someone. So he's a bit of an odd fellow.
He's a bit of an odd
He's having a right laugh, that geezer. I think people should look at some of his right. I'm not 1 second suggesting that Stanley Oddfellow is responsible for a pandemic, but there is a certain type of social pragmatism which certain people from certain echelons look at society and say, well, collateral damage, throughout history, there's been a whole swathe of people that have just been cast aside because elites or whoever think that they're disposable, and population control and all these things. Now, even the great Jonathan Porritt, and I say that totally, I've been very fortunate to be in various situations with Jonathan Porritt. Forum for the Future and all that good work, and it's like they would still talk about population as a consideration.
Yes,
but I don't think they'd ever think about any of some of the solutions that might be purported by all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds, right across the piece, right through history. But you're completely right. There's a need. You're completely right, Brian, because if Ed Deedigan says so, you must be. In my mind, you're completely right. That it's that commonality, isn't it? It's like, this isn't just going to affect this sort of person or that sort of person. This is a worldwide thing. If you don't get it under control, we're all going to completely, continually suffer. And if that's the case, it's in all our vested self-interest to come up with a solution.
I've actually touched base a bit with Jonathan Porritt, because a few years ago I got involved with a project called The Reef. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a renewable energy project, which at the moment is still conceptual, but for the Bristol Channel. As you're probably aware, the Bristol Channel's got the second highest tidal difference in the world.
The Severn Surge comes from it.
Exactly. And if we could capture the energy from that, we could actually generate an awful lot of power. And this chap that I know I got involved with, the first time I stood for Parliament was in 2010, and that was for North Somerset. So I got involved a bit with the Bristol Channel and looking at that amazing resource that is just there. And this thing called the Reef would stretch from Aberthaw, which is where there's a conventional coal-fired power station that's about to be switched off, but is still running. Across to very close to Hinkley Point. And that line, it was actually worked out in the 1930s, is the best line to capture the energy. So, the engineering has been there for a long time. The amount of energy we know how much it would be, because the chap that I was working with, a fellow called Rupert Armstrong Evans, he didn't get the contract to do the explorative, the exploration work. That went to Rolls-Royce and Atkins, who, ironically, Atkins had got a lot of his work already because he'd produced some stuff for the RSPB.
Right.
So they pinched the money effectively to do the research. But having said that, that was then, and it's quite useful if you've got a company like Rolls-Royce and Atkins that will do an evaluation of what you're trying to do, and they say it will generate this amount of energy. The amount of energy is 30.4 terawatts of power. Now that's an important figure because the amount of energy that Hinkley C will produce, theoretically, and actually it may never produce that because there are similar schemes which it's the largest nuclear power station that will ever have been built.
Built by who?
Well, there's it's the French and the Chinese.
Chinese,
lovely. But that's 30.2 terawatts of power. This is per annum.
Yeah.
It's not a daily figure.
So you differential about 20 something, is it?
No, so one is 30.4, the other is 30.2.
Oh right.
So
sorry,
it's almost the same amount of energy. Now, people have said, but the reef would cost too much. Well, we reckoned that it would probably cost around 20 billion to build. And the idea is it would be built using technology that goes back to the Second World War. Mm-hmm. You might have heard of the Mulberry Harbours.
Yes,
which were
Normandy and D-Day.
That's right, and there were, ironically, there were 17 kilometres of those. It's a massive rate that caissons that were brought in, built under fire in 6 months.
Yeah.
All right, they were bombed while they were building.
Yeah.
Now, so essentially the same technology, except that each concrete caisson has a huge turbine.
Yeah. But
instead of putting in these Rolls-Royce turbines, which actually are quite small and have a major problem, in other words, to run them, you have to run them under pressure. And that pressure kills the fish, which is why
that's what I was going to ask you about the elvers.
And But if you've got a really big turbine built with what you might almost call agricultural engineering technology, it would turn really slowly, and so the elvers, the fish, everything else can just swim straight through, swim back out again.
Because that was the big concern, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
These processes.
Yeah. But so we could be generating, and that would equate to about 12% of everything we generate at the moment in the UK. So it's a substantial amount of what we could be doing. So we're still hoping that will happen. And in fact, I wrote a paper for the government recently and sent it off. I haven't heard back. It's just one of those sort of frustrating things.
Yes.
You literally fill in a thing, you ping it off, and they don't even have to get back to you to say thank you for sending it.
Some of the processes of local and national democracy, say democracy. I mean, we should have such. There should be, and they do it in different countries. We're listening to a lot, and George Monbiot, fantastic, and Blind Boy, if you're listening. Two fantastic people on all sorts, and have been pointed in his direction by. Do you know Dr. Mark Everard? Yeah, he's a genius geezer, and it says his partner. He's the guy I was talking about. He's been around here, been around the world doing water in what have you. He pointed me out to all these sort of people, and some of the things that George Monbiot is saying now, I've thought in ways, not that I'm some great thinker, and it's like, all right, well, if George Monbiot is saying that, maybe I'm on the right path here, which is quite interesting, because he's talking about this idea of local democracy in various places where citizens would be able to put suggestions about how to spend local budgets and or initiatives, and then the rest of the community would vote on those, and then the councillors, whoever they are, elected officials, would be there to implement it or to give good reason why it shouldn't be implemented. And that would seem to me to be the better way up and around, because I guess, I keep slaughtering Boris Johnson, but that's what happens, I guess, if you have the big job, don't you?
Greta Thunberg, and she keeps talking about the science, and the science is vital because, yes, it's important to involve the people.
Yes.
But you've got to involve the science as well.
Oh, 100%. Go hand in hand. And explain the science.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is what's great about
But
Jonathan
what you
Porritt,
want to be aware of is populism.
Yes.
Where you jump on a thing. I mean, we know all about Mussolini and Hitler. Yeah. They were great orators. And they got people wound up. And so the people aren't always right. Yeah. As we can see from the past.
No, I agree.
And that's why there's a need for the science.
Of course, the stricture and the process at which ideas are transformed into reality. Yeah. You're totally right. Willy-nilly. Let's all have an ice ring. Why? Because everyone said so. Come on, guys. Let's think about what the implications are. So there would be all sorts of ways of looking at the practical and the environment. Well, the old Venn diagram of sustainable development, the economic, the social, and the environmental aspects of any project. But if it's not for the greater good and proven by I'm not expecting me or any lay person to. But I, of course, want the science of every and the engineering. If it
but let me give you some figures because these are quite interesting, and I only actually got hold of these earlier on this year through I was involved in it was a part of something called the Brighton Circle, which is a group of prospective parliamentary candidates who sort of link up with Europe. Yeah, our main trading partners, as we know.
We laugh. Oh,
those people, those people.
How's that going?
Yes. Good. Well, one of the guys I was talking to was a chap who's he's got a Scottish name, Ian McAllister, I think. He's the German kind of foreign minister for the EU, but his father's a Scot. And so I got, because I feel, where's the future of the UK? Yeah. This is vital. Where is our future? Yeah. One of the things, this is really interesting to look at the numbers. So it's 0.25 terawatts. Remember that figure, terawatts? Is the figure of energy that we use as a nation at any one time, approximately. All right, so that's the capacity that we need. That's not just for electricity. That's for all our petrol, diesel, everything. Yeah. For running the country. Yeah. That's what we need for our industry, our heating, the whole works. 0.25 terawatts. If you look at the map of the UK in terms of its wind energy production, at any one time, or at least stretched over a year and averaged out, it's 2 terawatts of power. Wow. Okay, just from the wind. That's not the solar, that's not the tidal, that's not the wind, the wave or whatever else. That's just the wind. Wow. And, well, thank goodness there are moves now to start to exploit that into the future. But we should be thinking about ourselves as an energy hub, not just for us, but we can power. Germany doesn't have this. Yeah. It's got some solar. Yeah. It's got a hell of a lot of coal, which they're trying to stop using. Yeah. But they don't have the sea and the wind, which we have. Yeah, absolutely. So we, in terms of where do we go in the future, I was trying to sort of push this idea to this German diplomat. Look, we can actually be useful to Europe here, whether we're in the EU or not. It doesn't matter. We can still provide that.
Well, when's that ever been a barrier to anything? When people want to get things done, they'll get things done.
Exactly.
If there's the right thing, that's amazing.
So the energy is there. The resources are there. We've just got to open our eyes and start investing in the right places.
And it's surely, as far as the reset goes, looking to the future, having a green. I don't know if that really works, but a survivor's look at how we work in harmony with nature. As I keep saying to people, we're a part of nature, not apart from nature. Yes. We don't look like, let's save the whales and save the pandas because bless them, they don't seem to be able to survive. It's like no. We're all. It's such a beautifully woven web, not of our making. Yeah. And whatever religious person may or may not be watching this. If that's a god or whatever that's made it, well, they've done a great job. and whilst I have breath in me, and there's a few out there wishing I didn't have any, would be saying, I would like to do as much as I can to maintain the human interaction with the planet, i.e. our survival, and not just in some sort of dystopian future where everyone's running because we're overrun by a fascist state, but we're actually living in harmony with nature and each other.
Yes.
Europe or whoever, the world, like you say about the pandemic, it's the same thing, we're all interlinked.
Yes.
I think there's a whole future in the green economy. It's in fact the way to go forward. There's jobs. Yeah. If Thatcher, God bless her, had, and I know that there's, I can make lots of criticisms, and it's quite easy to criticise Margaret Thatcher. You only have to read her life story and how she treated her sister, and you think...
Well, she was a scientist, actually.
Of course she was.
And she was one of the first world politicians to start saying, actually, this whole business with the climate change is real, and we've got to get serious about it.
Yeah, well, 100%. So there were lots of... I think that she thought all sorts of things about capitalism, which she was a bit shocked, I think, about the avarice and greed of the 80s. I think that what she unleashed, she was possibly... I've read other bits about her, and I thought, oh, well, that's an aspect I didn't know about her. But in the breaking down of the unions, in the breaking down traditional communities, in the breaking down... Look, my dad came across as an economic migrant, as a sort of Bevan boy type of thing, and it was horrendous in the mines, so he didn't do it. And as I said, he would rather have gone to Aden and potentially been shot than day in, day out. So not only for an environmental aspect is coal mining not a good idea, it was never a good idea. No one really enjoyed the banter, working class people up against it in the trenches or down a mine or the shipbuilding. It was a tremendous detriment to people's health. And they survived with the joie de vivre, and that's why people think there's a differential between the northern communities, because they were built in these traditional ways. They all shared the same hardships, and that's why the co-op came from Rochdale. The idea of people in a certain environment coming together to overcome adversity and just survive while they've been exploited, by the way, by the... Now, if she would have said, look, environmentally we don't need coal, we shouldn't have coal. Socially, it's not good, or personally for your physical health, it's not good. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring you above ground, and where we have the mines, we're going to re-employ you, but thank you for you and your generations of family that have stoked the fire of industry. Yeah. Possibly now to our detriment, but they didn't know that. And if we'd known what we know now at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, perhaps some of those ideas might have changed.
But look at what happened with Denmark and with Norway. What they did with their North Sea oil, their bit of the North Sea oil and gas. They exploited it. Yeah. Okay, that was perhaps a bad thing, whatever, but it was there. Yeah. We were all using gas at the time, using oil. We didn't regard that at the time as being a danger. But they were forward-thinking enough to build vast industries making wind turbines. Yeah. All right. So absolutely. What did we invest our North Sea oil in? Big question, that. You see where I'm going? Oh, yeah, well, now we're starting to do it. Yeah. But it's a bit late, and that actually comes back to another really important little science point, which I've been trying to look at, because I think it's vital. And that is, they say that in 2030, which is when we want to see Wiltshire carbon neutral, half the cars that will be on the road then are already on the road now. Yeah. So they're not electric, they're diesel, they're petrol, what. So what are we doing about making synthetic fuels that are made from renewables? Yeah. And you can do it. And it's interesting that Bosch, the German,
make everything
giant company, they are actually doing a lot of research into this. Now, actually, of course, Germany has got a long history of it. During the Second World War, they couldn't bring in oil, so they were turning coal into diesel and petrol. Yeah. It's not a difficult process, but you can do it by drawing the CO2 out of the air. So if you've got enough renewable energy being produced, which we could have from our tides, from our wind, from hydro and everything else, we could be, whenever there's more energy coming in then we actually need to pump into the national grid.
Yeah.
That energy can be turned into making fuels.
Right.
Now, then you don't have the problem of, well, what happens when you're producing more energy than you can use, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what you do with it.
Yeah.
And you start producing fuels which you can run current technology vehicles on. Now, yes, of course, it'd be lovely if we all had electric cars or whatever, but those have their own cost.
Of course they do.
And they cost around...
Where do the batteries come from?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And it's about 10 tons of CO2 to produce a car, whether it's an electric car or whether it's a...
Absolutely. There's some cost, that environmental cost that
yeah.
is paid or levied
sure.
somewhere along the line.
And we need to think about Joe Bloggs, or me for that matter. I've got an old petrol car because I can't afford to buy an electric car.
Yeah.
And it's how I get around if I'm not cycling.
Yeah.
But for the moment, that's what I've got. But we need to think about creating those fuels for the future, which solves that whole energy problem of what do you do? How do you store the energy? You can store it as fuel.
Yeah.
And you can literally combine hydrogen, which you get from the old experiment in the lab when you were at school and you were producing.
I was never allowed to go near
and
fire.
You were
all chemicals. Idiot, get out of here. Well, they were trying to make me sniff them. So.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, that simple experiment with hydrolysis where you create hydrogen.
There's a factory over in Swindon, is there not? That looking at hydrogen cells to run cars, essentially. There's so. On a macro level, on a countrywide level, I agree with you completely and whatever. So bringing it back home, bring it all back home, which is actually bizarrely the name of the project, the cross-cultural project we're doing with Croatia and Ireland,
right?
Which I talked to your colleague about. However, what are you thinking on a local environmental level? What do you think about all these new ideas for this distributor roads, the housing, whatever? What's your thoughts on that?
Concern. To start with,
yeah,
because it's been said that Wiltshire has actually built 5,000 more houses over the last few years than it's needed to. Mm-hmm. So, who are these houses going to be for? And another thing, you look at a lot of the houses. Where are the solar panels?
Yeah.
You
know? Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me started on who built them and why they built them and what they're for. Yeah, exactly. No, it's crazy.
But where are the people that are going to live in them?
Oh, they're in London currently.
A lot of them are commuting from here.
Absolutely, as I say.
Up the M4 to wherever. Yeah. What's the point in that? Right. A few years ago, I was looking at the possibility of a new town.
Yeah.
And you remember that there was the whole issue of what to do with Hallavington.
The base.
The air base.
The last place my father served in the Royal Air Force.
Well, there you go.
RAF Hallavington. That's why I came to this area.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly, of course, Dyson took it over.
Dyson, yeah.
But there is a preservation order on the land there, so they can turn the existing hangars into all kinds of buildings, which they've done. And it's brilliant. And it's great, and it's offering local jobs. But there's actually land close to Hallavington. There's an old railway station there. That it's a halt from in the old days, but it's on the main line.
Right.
So if you look at that land stretching to the east of Hallavington, you could actually build, which is where the railway station is. You could build a new town there, or a new kind of village, big village, to provide housing for the people working at the airfield with Dyson, but also just south of Junction 17. You've got this new big industrial area that's being built right now. So why don't you build, if you're going to build houses, why don't you build houses where the jobs are?
Yeah.
So people can literally get out of the door.
And just walk, then you say
travel. Or if they need to travel further, you build right next to a motorway. And get straight onto that. Or hopefully in a bus or something.
Noisy and not a very nice environment near a motorway, but carry on.
Or where there's a mainline railway.
Which I agree.
Which is
open up the old beach and reverse some of those cuts.
Exactly.
Cairn, get a thing between here and Cairn.
Yeah.
And any other place that wants to have a railway, because if we cut...
Bassett is the obvious one.
Yeah.
Because you've got Bassett is so close to Swindon.
Yeah.
You try driving out of Bassett in the morning, or in the evening trying to get back in. It's absolutely atrocious.
So we could reopening some of those railways, and obviously if the rail line is also sustainable and it's self-powered and it's, I guess it's electric now, most of it anyway, isn't it?
It's there.
Renewable. It is. I was going to say, it's not a massive stretch of the imagination. It's a reverse of what's happened. So I'll go along with you that. So
then you've got to say, look at the need.
Yeah.
You know, what is the need? And if you decide that you want to build, effectively it's like a donut around a town, which is what these new developments are.
Yes. Yeah.
But what happens with all of the infrastructure you need to go with it? The schools, the hospitals, the dentists,
the Bridge Centre. That's what happens with it, mate. Nothing. You have this.
Yeah.
This is taxpayers' money for a youth and community centre, right? Absolutely made for the purpose that it was built, and now it's a bad car park.
Yeah.
So people don't need to think. S.H.O.P Park. Look at the places that were built. So when I first came to this area, when my father, bless him, was sent sounds terrible, but you know, to RAF Leventon. So that's when I came to this area. So we'd come out. When I went to Sheldon School, you'd look over at Hard New State, and then it was just fields. And of course, you always hear it used to be fields. Well, of course, it used to be fields. This where the shop is used to be some type of field, stroke, whatever. Obviously, there's a need to progress and a need to change, but it has to be done with what you've said. There's not just the purpose of jobs, but social housing, not affordable housing, social housing. You know, for the people that are already existing here. So I don't know that there's been any linked up thinking other than a national prerogative and money changing hand, no doubt, in crowded. The dark and crowded rooms. I bet they're all taking vapes. It's not smoke because I'm thinking you can't smoke indoors anymore. Don't know who this geezer is, but is that your mate? He's got a Scottish name, but his father was Scottish, but he's German. What? All right. So the idea that in the existing town we've got in Chippenham, there isn't enough infrastructure for the existing population. Chippenham, just in case everyone doesn't know this, is one of the biggest towns in Wiltshire, and Swindon's a unitary body. So you've got Salisbury. I don't even know if it's not the biggest place in Wiltshire.
I think it's fast becoming that.
And it hasn't. So just on school, it's got 3 comprehensive schools, secondary schools, whatever they want to call themselves. 3. And that's incredible. It's incredible. I should be advocating more houses because a lot of the work we do is one of the areas when we're not doing sustainable development consultations with companies and all that sort of good stuff is an alternative education program using the arts for young people to access emotionally and whatever, all the life skills to have a better opportunity. I should be advocating more disparate groups of people coming to a town and lower academic attainment so that they have to use alternative. Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. I would, I want as many people to have an equal opportunity for the schools that we've got to have the proper support that they need, but for us to look at the current population and moving forward environmentally, what we need to do to counteract what is about to come, the unemployment and the mental health, and they both go together. The mental health, boom, 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 and the unemployment, So the idea of building new houses and no jobs, but the roads that go to these houses, but no facilities, it's like, really?
Have you been watching The Crown at all?
No, do you know why? I know the ending.
Oh, right. Very good one.
I'm getting crazy about it.
I started,
apparently very well made.
I started, a friend of mine put something up on LinkedIn about, what was it about? And he works for PwC. And he
What's PwC?
PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Oh,
the
right.
big lot in London.
Yeah.
But he was talking about how it was looking at Britain's place in the world over the last 80 years, whatever. Where next? And you've got to look at your past. They say if you don't have a history, you don't have a future. It's important to know about these things.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've actually really enjoyed watching that.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is I haven't got that far yet, but Princess Anne, actually just a couple of years ago, was suggesting the idea that for housing, if every village in rural Britain built 10 to 15 social houses, that would actually put life back into those communities, which are basically dying.
Yes.
Because they're full of oldies that have moved out, lovely place to live, oh boy, and all that sort of stuff. But you need young people in the communities. And that way, if there's a pub, it can prosper. If there's a church, if there's a village shop, if you've got people, you can have those services. If you haven't got the people, it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
And I think that is actually a really interesting idea. You could provide, tens of thousands of nice houses in. I'm not talking about nice houses. I'm talking about houses in nice places, which people can live in and enjoy. Yeah. And not everyone wants to live in a rural area, but
what about the fact, you're right, traditional families, the idea of second homes has also had a massive effect on particularly rural and seaside places. We do a lot of work bizarrely in Cornwall, which everyone might think, well, that's amazing. It's like, well, of course, it's just like Ireland, so it would be amazing. And it will probably be independent as well.
But then you've got to tax them. Well, then you've got to tax them.
Well, okay, or you say, and this is my thing, no one can have a second home until everyone's got a first, which Princess Anne might find quite struggling with. But anyway, that comes into another category of once we've retired the royal family, bless them.
Bless them.
Well, they've had, listen, with all the luxury and wealth that they've had, I don't think they've particularly developed a happy coexistence as they.
Well, that's part of the theme of the Crown, of course, because it looks into all of those issues.
It would have to, because I'm sure there's no reason in the world why any member of the royal family shouldn't be an absolutely decent person. And I know that Prince Charles, Jonathan Porritt, and all those people. Charles has used his privilege, if you like, to talk about our agriculture, our architecture, and sustainable development, which is fantastic. But obviously having a royal scenario skews the whole idea of a meritocracy or a equal society. I'm not blaming them. No. If Prince Charles, when you're watching this, he's a terribly interesting thing, this chap.
That's a very good impersonation.
Quite a fat guy and sitting there dealing. Who is he? He sounds like some sort of Irish guy that shouldn't be allowed. And then he's got Michael Caine coming in the back saying, "Charlie boy, your days are over. Go and retire in the back, have a nice time, ride some horses." I'm not talking about your wife. Here we go. So the thing is, I think that it's great what you said about Princess Anne and bless her. People having affordable houses or homes and communities that are designed with the environment and the social environment involved, absolutely. Rural communities, there's a load of isolation that people never get about rural communities, and living out in Lavington or Stanton St Quintin. Not that we felt isolated, because there was all sorts of facilities, and most of them we'd come into town for and walk into town for. I think many young people would do that now.
But why isn't there a cycle path alongside the A350?
There you go. There's
why not?
That's a great shout. I used to walk up and down that. Walk up and down that. I mean, obviously, I'd walk off it to.
There's the space for it, for goodness sake.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong there. That's actually a good shout. But an infrastructure of Sustrans, we're doing a great thing with it before, and I think if we look at rejuvenating the railway, that's what this 75 million is, as well as the mental health and the youth work and all the societal work that's needed.
I mean, there have been some where they've sort of screwed up. I mean, going down Bristol Road, for example, they've just taken out those plastic bollards. Well, those plastic bollards, cycling along with those things are bloody lethal, because if you hit one of those, you're going to go into the road.
That was a strange one way or the other.
And you could only really go down, you can come back up. And it is. So they've done a good, those needed to go. But at the same time, there are lots of places where you could put in possibly dual-use footpaths and cycleways between towns that already exist.
We have it in Brighton. You know Brighton. Yeah. I mean, you have to keep your wits about you when you're walking on the seafront. Yeah. But there's that cycle. There's that very big, wide carriageway. taxis, buses, whatever. Yeah. Then they've got the dual use pavement. I mean, it's marked, demarked, and people are going up and down it all day long.
Sure, but in the rural areas, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, you can easily cycle 5-6 miles to come in and do your shopping.
Yes.
Except you don't, because you're scared of getting squashed by a lorry or a car or whatever it is. You know.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. So houses, distributor roads. What about the three? That was crazy. Do you not think? I mean, again, the reset would have to look at how we vote on various projects and how we use our budgets and stuff, localized budgets. But the idea of having three sort of fait accompli of fait accompli, who am I? It is I who's coming these fait accompli, that you have choice of 3 roads. You don't have a choice of, look, here's the idea, this is what we're thinking maybe 1 road, maybe 2 roads, 3, these ideas, or do you think we shouldn't be spending this money on this anymore because our priorities must have changed? If they don't get the change. Were you involved? You are a sitting councillor at the moment. Were you involved in the recent voting?
Well, I was the one that wrote the motion for the climate emergency and got that passed. So
he's the boy. Fair play to you.
Well, I mean, it was.
Did everyone vote on that in Chippenham Town? Is it Chippenham Town Council or
no? This was for the whole of Wiltshire.
Oh, fair play.
So I wrote that motion with Gavin Grant, who's councillor for Malmesbury.
Right. Is he Liberal Democrat as well?
Yes, he is. Yeah. So
you're doing very well, you lad, aren't you?
Well, we try and do our best, so we do. And I've got an Irish connection as well.
Good.
So there you go.
Good.
But what was really interesting about that vote was that 2 weeks before the vote, I had gone to meet with Baroness Jane Scott, bless her, who's no longer, I mean, she's in London because she's in the House of Lords, but she was running Wiltshire Council at the time. And
one of her legacies. Well, you know what I mean? One of the legacies.
So I went along to see
the death of the youth service
with Professor Waltham, who's from Marlborough. Right. And he's a London University professor of climate science, but he lives in Marlborough. So Dave, I asked him if he would help me put this motion together. Yeah. And it was inspired, it has to be said, by the Extinction Rebellion thing, which happened, this was back in 2018, around Christmas time. I'd never heard of them, and suddenly they turned up outside County Hall, and I thought, this is a movement I don't know about. It's really interesting. Yeah. And you know when there's like a momentum there? Yeah. So it was from that that I met with one of their young members who he suggested some ideas for a motion, which other areas have done. I think at that stage there'd been one done in Bristol. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at the Bristol one, which was fairly close by, and we changed it for a rural area because obviously it's, you know, we're very different from Bristol. Yeah. So that was how it was written. It was take it and make it, you know, right. But anyway, I took it along to this meeting with Baroness Jane Scott.
I love the fact you keep calling her Baroness Jane Scott. I wouldn't do that anymore.
Whatever, Jane Scott, whatever. Yeah. But
no, bless you. I'm just saying. Yeah. I think that's part of the problem. The old way of like giving people boosting their ego.
Well, we went to meet her, and she was very upset with the idea of us calling it an emergency, and how dare we call it an emergency, and she wasn't going to all this kind of stuff. And I had written to explain that I was bringing Dave Waltham with me, but they hadn't read their emails. And so at that stage I said, well, I turned to David and I said, would you like to say something? And it was like, she said, well, who is this chap? You know, and I said, well, actually,
bring me next time.
I explained to you who he is. He's a professor of climate science from the University of London. And perhaps we should listen to something, you know, and he really knows his science, not surprisingly. Yeah. And he explained the situation. When it came to the day, actually at the meeting it was obvious we weren't going to get cooperation. So I said, look, I suggest you write your own motion. Don't call it climate emergency, call it global warming. and I've written mine. You put in yours, I'll vote for yours, and I hope you'll vote for mine. So then we turned up 2 weeks later, full council, and to be fair, we were given well over an hour to debate, which was pretty important. And it was right at the end of the day. And to start with, various things were thrown at us. We were being, trying it on and, trying to go for votes or whatever it was. But we put our case, and slowly, their arguments started to fall apart because they didn't really have any arguments. But members of the Conservatives started standing up. I remember one of them, actually, it's the guy who's the current chair. And he stood up and he said, actually, we should be thinking about our grandchildren.
Fair play. Who's that guy?
He's the current chair. Can't remember his name right now, but he's the chair of Wiltshire Council.
Okay. Fair play to him.
And he said, we should be thinking about our grandchildren. And slowly, suddenly, it felt like there was a movement in the room. And this, to my mind, is what democracy should be about. You might come into an argument with your own preconceptions, but you're prepared to listen. And when the vote was actually held, it was like a rugby score. I think it was 36 votes for, 32 against, and 7 abstentions. And a lot of the abstentions were actually in the cabinet. And it was just like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just jumped up in the air and hollered. I was so pleased about it. And obviously what has happened since is from that vote.
Fantastic.
And we
So
now
well
have
done, Extinction Rebellion.
Well, indeed.
Absolutely.
And there is now a very good team in Wiltshire Council of experts who are researching it. It's led by a lady called Ariane Crampton, who was on a previous climate team before, but she really knows this stuff. And so there are some really good people. We've got this task group, which I'm a member of, and I imagine you've had Nick Murray, Councillor Nick Murray?
No, I have read lots of his stuff, and I know from other sources.
He's an independent,
I've
but
talked to him. He is quite
amazing. He knows his stuff, and it's been brilliant having him on board because he can offer a degree of professionalism in terms of that particular. I mean, I'm passionate about this stuff, but I'm an engineer. I'm not a scientist when it comes to climate, but I'm interested. So to have him involved as well, and we've put together. We've had. I mean, we were having a meeting every week last year to bring in experts on just about everything you can imagine. Solar generation, for fields. I mean, already Wiltshire's got a lot of solar farms. Where we could have new ones, all of that sort of stuff. So we've had a lot of really good expertise come in and talk to us. Things like car charging points, all of that sort of stuff. Trying to learn the lessons. And we put that into a couple of papers which have been put to the Cabinet. I must say I'm disappointed with what they've come back. They've sort of not answered the question. Do you know how it is when go back to your sort of school days when you got told off because you didn't answer the question? Well, that's what I was saying to them. Look, for goodness sake, if you're going to say no, but explain your
qualifying
reasons. Exactly. But don't just answer another question and the hope that the question that we've asked will go away.
Isn't there just? I don't know if this is true or not, but is there a climate denier on the Cabinet or part of the roads or some sort of subgroup?
It is said. I think probably more than one.
Dun dun dun. For all you climate deniers out here, I want you to understand a few things. If I can understand them, and I'm seriously as thick as a log, right? I can understand this stuff. So when good people spent time explaining stuff to me 23 years ago, when they were saying things like, there's about 30 years before we reach the tipping point, I did a lot of things about that. Now, half of it is I increased the population of the world by having lots of kids, but I think they're good kids, so good, well done to their mums.
Someone's got
to populate them with good-looking people.
Absolutely.
But also, I do find it amazing. I do find myself as the Emperor's New Clothes, the kid in the Emperor's New Clothes, going to say, look, guys, are we serious here? And all sorts of levels. But with this climate breakdown, this is what's happening. The climate's breaking down, and we have been partly responsible for it. It doesn't matter what people think how it was caused or whatever. What does matter, however, is that we do as many things as we can to not increase any of those areas of the demise of our ability to live within this climate. For our ability. If you don't like pandas and you don't like whales, not the country obviously, because it's marvellous. Ooh. I don't know who that was though. That's neither Tom Jones or Richard Burton. If you don't have Tom Jones or Richard Burton, Elizabeth, that was, I don't know, that's a bit spooky. But you just cannot. This is the thing about local democracy as well. Local councillors, bless. There's a good thing in that no one has to be qualified to be a councillor, and that makes it open to anyone that can be bothered, to be fair, in a lot of ways. But there is something to be said about making decisions, all sorts. Bridge Centre, crazy. That's just, people just don't get it if they, And we used to use that more than the youth service.
Right.
And, now we're relying on the good people of the Rotarians and Wiltshire Foundation, so that we can have a hall because we used to use the Bridge Centre all the time. Now, same thing with people that are in those cabinets and in things like, what are your credentials other than because you belong to the Conservative Party in this county, which is a shame, really. A lot of the working class people have been under the illusion that they have somehow become part of that whole tradition of conservatism. They're deluded. But they're making decisions based on no facts, no real information, and not for the betterment. They couldn't possibly do it for the betterment of everyone. It's got to be that they have some sort of economical idea of that, we're getting this money here and this money and building. And I'm impressed that whoever the chair that said about thinking about their grandchildren, it's absolutely got to be that. So there's a few questions about the sort of validity.
And going back to the science thing, one of the things I'm actually, I am still a member of the Institute of Agricultural Engineers, so I'm still kind of like hooked up with that. And you might have seen a film. It was on Netflix, and I think it was on YouTube for a while. It's called Kiss the Ground. Woody Harrelson, the Hollywood actor, kind of
Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground. Okay. Well worth watching.
Yeah.
But in this film, they're looking. It's a kind of documentary, really, of how do we solve the world's problems. And one of the most important resources that we have, which we don't think about very much, is soil. I'm a soil and water engineer.
Oh, my Lord. So it's such an important issue.
Well, I was
tell everyone.
Absolutely fascinated about
this. Oh, good lad. Well done.
So now, actually, it was Dave Waltham that I first heard this idea from.
60 harvests?
Indeed. Yeah. But the idea is that if you, and of course, we have a lot of cattle in this country, and there is the whole debate, are cattle a problem for the climate or can they be part of the solution? Now then it starts to become rather interesting, because the idea is if you corral your cattle into fairly small places in a field and you move them slowly across that field, day after day you move them, the poop that they produce gets walked into the ground and you build up soil.
Excellent.
Okay. Now building up
excrement, excellent.
Exactly. But building up the soil,
yeah.
What is that soil mostly made of? Carbon.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're creating soils. Now you work out how much soil you could build up, how much CO2 you can take out of the air. Now one of the best ways of, it looks like, I'll qualify that, it looks like one of the best ways of actually sequestrating CO2 from the air is to turn it into soil.
And there's a massive depletion, is there not, of soil across the planet?
Exactly.
And
we've been dependent on chemical agriculture, which destroys it.
Absolutely.
The soil is a biome; it's full of all kinds of amazing.
And organophosphates that we've used, all those.
But it doesn't. You don't have to do that. If you can do it. So what we're doing at the moment is actually work going on in the north of Wiltshire. A farmer I know is on his land. It's involving the Rothamsted Institute, which is the foremost kind of agricultural research institute in this country, into actually saying, does this work or not? And if we can show that it works, we can, from here, from Little Wiltshire, we can start to find scientifically ways in which we can start to turn the climate crisis around. And that is so important.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm so chuffed that you said about the soil.
Yeah.
We've got an Unlock Reset Festival for the 21st of June. And part of that is obviously looking at new ways forward. How do you fancy, if you're around about that time, coming and doing some talks about...
Love to.
Because if we've still got this place, we're going to have various venues.
Yeah.
So there'll be celebrations, of course, there'll be all sorts of community groups, but it's this type of idea that we need to, A, look on a local level what we're doing about it. Avon needs trees.
Yeah.
Do you know the initiative?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, this linking everyone together.
Yeah.
Non-partisan, non-political
and
things.
we don't need to feel we're doomed. We're not doomed.
No, my goodness, I wouldn't be here. Why do we do this?
Humanity...
I'd be out in the pub. Isn't a pub open? Okay, I'd break into one. And I'd be drinking. I'd just be drinking, Brian. I wouldn't give a damn about Norwich. Not even football. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Yeah. I feel very optimistic. I may be as deluded as many people think I am. But I have great ambitions for... And what was the lady we had here before?
Catherine McDermott.
I mean, when you meet someone like that, you say, okay, all right then.
Yeah.
You know, Greta Thunberg, of course, but people like that in our community just say, right, and I want to encourage it all the time. Yeah. Let's have some talks about everything that you know about, and, you know, whatever hat you want to have on. I don't really care, to be fair. Not that this is a venue. My son's partner, she's going to be coming to talk about, I'm telling her now through this, this isn't her, to do about fungi and all the benefits of, all the health benefits and everything else. But people like that talking about water resources, everything else, so that everyone here in this town can understand how it all works and what their part in it is, and about recycling. I've recently changed the last couple of years into a plant-based diet. I'm not a vegan, and I emphasise the idea, but not because I don't agree with what vegans do or don't. Look at me, I'm wearing leather shoes, and I would possibly now, most of these things are second-hand, I would look at that as a way forward. We've got a recycled clothing thing here, but the idea of soil, people have really no idea, and it's not because they don't want to, it's like, there is a theory that there is about 60 harvests left.
Yes, I know.
And we have to kind of get people to understand, therefore, what we're doing with soil, how we're using it, and how we are. You know, we got Monsanto and all the GM things. We did a tour once with the Science Museum up and down the country about a consultation using Forum Theatre about GM foods, and I think that's another area that people, and there's all sorts of different derivations of that now. I know there's all sorts of, I don't need to talk about it, specialists can, but on the 21st of June, it would be fantastic, all things being considered. Yeah. Even if it's not, we're going to do a virtual thing, so maybe we can organise for you to do all singing, all dancing presentation. It's so important that we've got people like yourself in our community. I thank you for your time today. You come back anytime you want, and anyone else to help, because this, all we want to do, it's a sustainable development organisation, is get the information out there. I'm not trying to, for any conservatives listen to this and think, he's got a chip on his shoulders, with chip made of potato because I'm Irish. How dare you? It's not that. It's that I've worked in prisons, I've worked in lots of areas, I've seen what deprivation does, and I wouldn't wish some of the ways that I know that some people I've worked with have used to cope with that, to be visited on anyone or anyone else's family. So for the sake of all our communities, thank you, all the people that do stand for local government. Because as much as I would criticise people for not having the right information or whatever, or making ill-informed decisions, I also must applaud anyone that's willing to put their head above the parapet and do it for our community. So thank you on behalf of me, our community group. Anything else? You want anything to say?
It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Bless you, sir.
I would actually like to hear from you more about what you do.
Yes.
You probably don't have time to do that
because we've got another one of your glorious colleagues, Jenny Budgell, who's about to come here, and it's interesting. Yep. Well, I love that we've given this offer out to anyone and everyone, and any independents that are out there that want to get hold of us, and any more of your colleagues. We've been doing so many of them recently because we think it's important. Yep. And actually I have to thank Ross Henning, because he's...
Well, Ross told me about this, so...
I have to thank him because he was a brave man to come in.
Yeah.
I give him a load of jip, he gave me a load of... He's fantastic.
Oh, he is.
And he's a Tottenham supporter. So he's obviously a good chap, but I think it's really great that you guys are doing it. That you happen to be Liberal Democrats is up to you. The fact that you're decent people who are doing your best for our community, I've got to say, fair play to you.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing you again, and you can find out all about definitely find out. Thank you.
Spinning at 1,000 miles an hour.